In the 5th year after separating from Xia Huai, we met again in the cave of 10,000 demons. He arrived like a god with his disciples, while I huddled in the corner, awkwardly holding a trembling child. When our eyes met, his expression changed suddenly as he pointed at the child and asked, "Mine?" I raised my hand to cover the child's face and coldly replied, "No, it has nothing to do with you." Xia Huai forcibly took me and the child back to Yunxia sect. I never thought I would return here in this way. The place we stayed was still that same small courtyard from before. Just as I laid the sleeping child down, someone barged in, and before entering, I heard a loud, aggressive voice. "I want to see just how beautiful this woman is. How could she make him disregard Senior Sister Gu's feelings and keep her here?" The door was pushed open with force, and I turned to face him. Xiaowan stepped in, his foot still at the threshold, eyes wide with shock, stuttering in surprise, "Sister-in-law." Suddenly remembering that I had divorced Xia Huai years ago, I no longer deserved to be called sister-in-law by him. Xiaowan snapped back to his senses, showing a hint of regret for his outburst. He withdrew his other foot, cleared his throat, put his hands on his hips, and tilted his chin slightly. "Of course, who else would it be?" "What's wrong? Can't make it outside, so you came back to ask my senior brother to take you in?" His loud voice woke the sleepy Tinga. The child, feeling uncomfortable, opened his eyes and immediately began to cry. Xiaowan peered in suspiciously. "Where's that child's voice coming from?" He took 2 steps forward and reached the bed, only to gasp in shock. You had a child with my senior brother behind my back?" I frowned. "He's not his." "Not even a fool would believe that. He looks just like my senior brother." Seeing Xiaowan's fierce demeanor, Tinga didn't even wipe his tears before tumbling off the bed and charging at him like a little calf. "Don't bully my mom." Xiaowan was caught off guard and stumbled back 2 steps. His gaze shifted from the child to me, realization dawning on him. "No wonder you left so decisively back then. You were waiting here. Did you hear that my senior brother and senior sister Gu are getting married soon, so you rushed back with a child?" A shadow appeared at the doorway. Xia Huai looked at me, and he was also waiting for my response. I had been married to Xia Huai for 8 years. When we divorced, everyone in Yunxia's sect was overjoyed. Everyone knew that Xia Huai had married me out of necessity. He was supposed to have a better match. Before the former sect leader passed away, he made Xia Huai kneel by the bed and vow to treat me well, stating that unless I spoke, he could never take the initiative to divorce me in this lifetime. Xia Huai agreed. On our wedding day, his junior sister left behind a broken sword and voluntarily left the sect. 2 months after marrying Xia Huai, the sect leader passed away. As the eldest disciple, Xia Huai took over the position, and everyone in Yunxia's sect respected him but refused to acknowledge me as the sect leader's wife. It was simply because I was an ordinary mortal without spiritual roots and couldn't cultivate. Standing beside Xia Huai as his partner, I was indeed not worthy. The day after our wedding, Xia Huai received an order from the Immortal Alliance to lead the disciples to the East Sea to exterminate a vicious dragon. The elders of Yunxia's sect arranged a remote little courtyard for me on the main peak. They pointedly indicated that having a mere mortal live in the sect was already a great blessing. I shouldn't expect to act high and mighty as the sect leader's wife in Yunxia sect. I never thought that way and didn't take this status seriously. I moved into the little courtyard with empty hands. It was very simple, just a bed, a table, and 2 stools. The first hurdle of cultivating immortality is fasting. They didn't have too many requirements for clothing. But mortals are different. We need to eat, drink, and take care of ourselves. I spent 2 months arranging the house into a comfortable space with my own hands. Yunxia sect specifically assigned a notable disciple to deliver some daily necessities to me. Perhaps seeing me all alone every day was pitiful. He couldn't help but tell me, "Sect leader Xia has been back for over half a month." I smiled and thanked him. I knew Xia Huai had returned. I was a light sleeper. These past few nights, as soon as it got late, the same footsteps would visit outside my courtyard. He mostly just lingered outside the courtyard door, sometimes even pushing the door open to come in. but he had never presumptuously opened my room door. We were married, but we still weren't a real couple. When Master Yu brought me back, everyone only knew I was an orphan and that I had done him a favor. Yu Chunlin was severely injured while collecting immortal herbs in Kunlun, losing most of his cultivation. He didn't have much time left after returning. No one expected him to entrust me to his most valued disciple. Master's orders are absolute. Xia Huai had no feelings for me, and I didn't want to impose on anyone. I initially thought Xia Huai would never push open my room door in this lifetime until the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival when I cooked a bowl of noodles and found him in my room. Xia Huai's gaze fell on the steaming bowl in my hands and he asked, "Could you spare me a pair of chopsticks?" 3. The celestial beings, who are untouched by the mortal world, began visiting my little courtyard more frequently. Seeing that I enjoyed tending to flowers and plants, he would bring over some rare and exotic blooms. I often ended up killing them, but Xia Huai never said a word. He would quietly take them away and replace them with a new batch. The pile of dead flowers grew higher and higher. One day, Xia Huai brought over a furnace and started teaching me how to concoct elixirs, step by step. Life in the little courtyard gradually became less monotonous. Yunxia sect is ranked quite low among the 100 or so sects in the Immortal Alliance. The highest-ranking member of the sect had only reached the late stage of the nascent soul. Being a weak sect, they were often oppressed and bullied, and would occasionally face sneak attacks from demon clans or powerful beasts. Among the disciples Yuyue Chunlin took in, there were 2 exceptionally talented cultivators. One was Xia Huai, and the other was Gu Xiangling, who had since left. Now, as the sect leader, Xia Huai bore the heavy responsibility of Yunxia sect and was often busy with affairs. But he always made time to accompany me. I could tell he was trying to see me as his wife. Since I couldn't cultivate like them, he taught me how to concoct elixirs, draw talismans, or practice some sword techniques to strengthen my body. Although he didn't need to eat, he would sit down with me at mealtimes. Whenever he had free time, Xia Huai would take me out for walks and practice flying on his sword. Our relationship gradually shifted from distant to close. After Xia Huai stayed the night, we became a real husband and wife. I was not very talkative on ordinary days. For a while, I became engrossed in carving wood, and Xia Huai would often return home without exchanging many words with me. He was naturally reserved and not one for much conversation. During those days, he would pace back and forth in front of me, and when he saw I was ignoring him, he would sit down beside me to carve wood, struggling to find topics to discuss. In just a few days, our little courtyard was filled with various wooden carvings. A disciple who often brought me supplies became interested in a carved bird, so I gifted it to him. But the next day, the bird returned to its original place. When Xia Huai saw the bird was back, his expression was completely natural. He said he just wanted to take a look. He was afraid his hands would be clumsy and break it, so he asked me to return it. That disciple was always careful and gentle. There was no way he could have damaged the carving. I then realized that Xia Huai was quite possessive. He didn't want to share his belongings with just anyone. One day, Xia Huai suddenly got the urge and insisted I carve a little figure from a piece of divine wood he had brought. As I was sketching the facial features, a small figure suddenly climbed up the wall of the courtyard. He poked his head over and shouted at me, "Senior brother." I was startled by his loud voice, and as the blade sliced through my fingertip, blood immediately bubbled up and was absorbed by the wood in my hand. Xia Huai's expression tensed. He first helped me stop the bleeding, then, with a serious face, stood up to pull that little boy down from the wall. When I first saw Xia Wan, he was only 6 years old, brash and arrogant. Held by Xia Huai, he still dared to point at me and ask, "Are you the woman who scared off Sister Gu? If you're so capable of chasing Sister Gu away, why can't you come out to meet people? Instead, you're just hiding in this little room like a coward." Xia Huai's face darkened as he rudely covered his mouth and tossed him out without hesitation. For some reason, even though Xia Wan clearly disliked me, he liked coming to find me. He would often jump around me, mocking and teasing. I couldn't be bothered with him, and Xiaowan made so much noise that he would beg me for water when he got thirsty. When he got tired, he would lie down on the bed and fall asleep without a care. When Xiaohuai came back and saw him, he frowned. He also found the boy annoying and always looked for excuses to throw him farther away. Eventually, he stopped making excuses and directly sent him down the mountain to train with the other senior brothers and sisters. 4. If this could go on forever, Xiaohuai and I could have become a harmonious couple, treating each other with respect until the day I passed away. A mortal's lifespan is only a few decades, but for cultivators, it's just a fleeting moment. But then Xiaohuai reunited with Gu Xiangling. The long-lost junior sister made a name for herself in the Immortal Alliance competition, a prodigy who impressed everyone with her strength. Among those she impressed was Xiaohuai. Later, they fought side by side in the ancient divine mirror, and Gu Xiangling was severely injured while saving Xiaohuai. He brought her back to Yunxia sect, and from that point on, he rarely returned to the little courtyard. With nothing to do, Xiaowan ran to me every day to pass on messages. He would tell me how powerful Sister Gu was, how admired she was by the brothers, and how the elders liked her. Even Xiaohuai spent every day by her side. I remained indifferent, simply handing him the newly concocted elixirs to deliver to Xiaohuai, who was also injured. Xiaowan took the elixirs and left, only to come back shortly after, puzzled. "Aren't you jealous? Your husband doesn't even pay attention to you. He's just circling around someone else." I replied, "He's not a puppet. I can't control him." Xiaowan looked at me in disbelief, shaking the vial. "Is there anything you want me to tell him?"
No.
Everyone in Yunxia sect knew that he had once been infatuated with Gu Xiangling. During the years I was married to Xiaohuai, I had not merely worn the title of sect leader's wife in vain. There were countless matters, big and small, within the sect. Aside from cultivation-related affairs, I helped Xiaohuai manage everything else I could. I was meticulous in my tasks, ensuring nothing was overlooked. The various elixirs I refined got better and better. Those of higher cultivation levels had no use for them, but the low-level disciples who were just starting out were all grateful to me. Over the 8 years, I transformed from a mere mortal in their eyes to being respectfully addressed as Madam. All my efforts ultimately couldn't compare to a single Gu Xiangling. I had been waiting for Xiaohuai to come see me, but the first to arrive was Gu Xiangling. She got straight to the point. "I grew up with Xiaohuai. We were meant for each other. If you hadn't interfered back then, I should be the one by his side now. When it comes to favors, he doesn't owe you. When it comes to feelings, he owes me more. Now that I've returned, he is bound to be with me. You're just a mortal with no spiritual roots to cultivate. He has treated you well over the years, but being by his side will only hold him back and make him the subject of ridicule. If you're willing to leave voluntarily, I can ensure you a life without worry and grant you peace for the rest of your days." If she weren't speaking directly to me, I might have admired her boldness. I responded, "There's no need to say these things. I'm waiting for Xiaohuai to come." Gu Xiangling stood up, her eyes filled with pity as she looked at me. The strongest cultivator in Yunxia sect is only at the mid-stage of the golden core. Counting the 2 elders, there are only 4 of us, including myself. The disparity between you and me is clear. I told Xiaohuai that with you here, he wouldn't choose you. Gu Xiangling didn't speak lightly. On the night she left, Xiaohuai returned.
5.
He returned as usual, first drinking the tea I brewed on the table. When he saw me making pills, he came over and quietly watched for a long time. After I stored the finished pills in a bottle, I casually asked, "How is your injury healing?" He instinctively adjusted his clothing, straightened his back, and smiled faintly at me. "Your pills are the most effective." I placed the medicine bottle aside. "I can smell the blood. Don't force yourself." He gathered the bottles on the table into his hands and, after a moment of contemplation, said, "Qingsui, I have something to discuss with you." He paused for a long while before continuing. "I found a suitable place to live not far from Yunxia sect, where I can grow flowers and raise birds and beasts. Gu Xiangling came to see me this afternoon and already mentioned it." I carefully washed my hands in the basin, dried them, and turned back to him. I'll ask you just one question. Do you care about me? His eyelashes trembled slightly, and he gazed deeply at me. I do care. If I want to stay and be by your side, would you be willing to go all out to make that happen? He averted his gaze, his fingers tightening until the knuckles turned white, showing signs of pain and struggle. Ching Sui, I bear the responsibility of Yunxia sect. I can't only think of myself. That town is at the foot of Yunxia sect, so I can visit you every day. It would be no different from being here. If that's the case, then why must I leave? It was just a matter of weighing the pros and cons and choosing to discard me. A pain, unlike any I had felt before, surged through my chest, coursing through my body's meridians. I forced myself to suppress the discomfort and nodded. He thought I had agreed, a smile of both joy and guilt spreading across his face. Ching Sui, please bear with it for now and wait for me. No need to wait. Write me a divorce letter now. If you don't need me, then I won't stay. He froze, his eyes filled with pain. I waited a few days to receive his divorce letter. Everyone at Yunxia sect was waiting for my departure, and Xiaowan came to bother me every day. Sister-in-law, are you leaving today? You haven't left today either. Sister-in-law, don't you want to leave? It's the 5th day. They're all betting on when you'll leave. Xiaowan, like in his childhood, leaned against the wall, chattering nonstop. I bet you won't leave. The world outside is chaotic. There are demons, monsters, and some malicious loose cultivators. As a lone girl, if you step outside, you might meet a tragic end before you even leave the mountain. Why don't I help you plead with the senior brother again? He was so noisy that I threw something at him, hitting him squarely in the forehead. Xiaowan let out a yelp as he fell off the wall. I like to see things through to the end. On the 7th day, after a long wait, the last batch of pills was finally finished. I stored them in a bottle and placed it on the usual shelf. After completing this final task, I left Yunxia sect. When I left, no one knew. 8 years ago, I came empty-handed. Now, I left with a wooden piece in my hand. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. When faced with Xiaowan's question, I pondered seriously before shaking my head. No, I haven't heard that news. After leaving Yunxia sect, I had not paid attention to their affairs. Reuniting with Xiaowan in the 10,000 demon cave was purely a coincidence. Xiaowan's smug expression froze, and he scratched his head. Where have you been all these years? I searched all over the world with senior brother, almost digging underground to find. Xia Huai walked in, interrupting him. Xiaowan, you go out first. After a long separation, he wanted to chat with me. Xiaowan didn't dare to delay and hurriedly slipped away. Once the door closed, Xia Huai's gaze lingered on me for a long time. He looked at me intently. As his gaze slowly shifted down, Xia Huai squatted down to look at the vigilant Tinga and attempted to smile at him. However, his expression was stiff, and his smile didn't look good. Xia Huai tried to touch Tinga's face, but before he could, Tinga swatted his hand away. Looking at the child, his eyes slightly reddened. Good child, can you tell me your name? Tinga looked up at me. I patted his head, and he finally told Xia Huai. Tinga, can I hug you? Xia Huai's voice was hoarse. I am your father. Both Tinga and I frowned and denied in unison. He's not your child. You're not my dad. Xia Huai's hand hovered in the air for a long time before he slowly withdrew it. I'm sorry. I was too anxious. He tried to guide the conversation. Look at my face. Don't you think it looks very much like yours? Tinga looked at him seriously, and indeed, they looked very much alike. Xia Huai stood up, wanting to say something else. But he saw Tinga suddenly run in front of him, pushing him outside with both hands. Get out! Get out! Xia Huai didn't dare to provoke him, and could only retreat step by step until he was outside the door. He watched Tinga clap his hands together and slam the door shut with a bang. Tinga ran back to my side, nervously hugging my leg. Mother, having one like me is enough. There's no need to raise another one. His clear voice could be heard outside the door. Xia Huai stood there for a moment before leaving silently. After nightfall, Tinga fell into a deep sleep on the bed. I looked around this courtyard. After 5 years, everything was as it was, almost unchanged. Even the medicine bottle I casually placed on the shelf before leaving was facing the same direction as before. When I took it down and opened it, there was a little less medicine inside. 5 years felt like only 5 days had passed. I put the medicine bottle back on the shelf, turned around, and saw Xia Huai standing at the door, staring blankly. I've been dreaming of this scene. I dreamt that one day I would open the door and see you back.
7.
Xia Huai said that over the past 5 years, he had been looking for me. He searched countless places but could never find my trace. I interrupted him. What do you want with me? If you had told me you had Tinga at that time, he stepped closer and held my hand, a bit excited. I would never have given you that divorce letter, letting you suffer alone outside. I recall the situation back then. 5 years ago, we both made our choices. You needn't feel indebted to me for anything. If I felt it was unfair, I would have asked you back then. I wouldn't wait until now and do foolish things like silently enduring grievances and seeking out my own suffering. With each of my words, Xia Huai's expression grew more difficult to bear, as if I were stabbing him in the heart. And also, Tinga is truly not your child, nor is he mine. He just resembles you a bit. Stop talking. He didn't want to hear more and forcibly changed the subject. I know you don't want to return with me. The ancient divine mirror will open soon, and things outside are quite unstable. You can stay here and recuperate. Xia Huai tried to comfort me. Once this is over, we can be together again. After saying that, he turned and left as if escaping.
8.
Xia Huai would be leaving Yunxia sect for a few days to attend to business. Before he left, he set up a restriction formation in the courtyard. No one from outside could enter, and Tinga and I couldn't leave either. Tinga wandered around the door, his small hands reaching out, touching an invisible barrier at the entrance to the courtyard. He pressed down slightly with his fingertips and was bounced back. He huffed angrily to come complain to me. This person is really unreasonable. He invites us back and then locks us in here. Mother, if you go back with him and cooperate, are you saying you like him? I laughed and asked, do you know what it means to like someone? He nodded seriously, looking very mature for his age. I know. Pang Chi said so. Just listen to her and go along with her. That means you like her. So Pang Chi likes you, and he's still waiting for us to go back. The little guy put his hands behind his back and said sternly, if you stay here, someone will be crying at home. I pinched his little face. The ancient divine mirror will open soon. I don't know the location, but the people from the immortal sect surely do. We'll stay here for now and follow them when the time comes. I grew up with Pang Chi. A long time ago, he got into a fight for me, and it left him with a chronic illness. In recent years, it has worsened, and one of the medicines needed for a complete cure can only be found within the ancient divine mirror. The ancient divine mirror is one of the artifacts left behind after a celestial being fell. It hides thousands of worlds and countless treasures, making it a must-visit place for cultivators to hone their skills and search for treasures. Now it has been occupied by the Immortal Alliance. To prevent demons and some evil cultivators from coveting it, the time and place of the mirror's opening are known only to those within the Immortal Alliance. I only remembered this when I saw Xia Huai in the Wanyao cave. In the short span of a few years, the Yunxia sect had produced 7 or 8 disciples who had advanced from qi refining to foundation establishment. But in today's world, where spiritual energy is thin, it is hard to find talented individuals. The Yunxia sect would surely be one of the invited sects to go to the ancient divine mirror. Rather than wandering around aimlessly, it would be better to follow behind them. 10 days later, Xia Huai returned. He didn't come to see us. Instead, it was Xia Wan who came. Xia Wan brought 2 wooden boxes. One contained a delicate hairpin. The other contained 3 sugar figures. I could vaguely see that they were modeled after me, Tinga and Xia Huai. The little figures were remarkably lifelike. Tinga had never seen anything like this and was instantly captivated. He picked up the middle figure and exclaimed, "This looks like me." He brought his little nose close to sniff, licked it, and his eyes lit up. Then he opened his mouth wide and took a big bite. Before either Xiaowan or I could stop him, he had bitten off half of his own figure. With the sugar in his mouth, Tinga chomped away, finishing it off. He licked his lips and stared hungrily at the remaining two. So sweet. Xiaowan was speechless. "You act like you've never had candy before." Tinga replied proudly, "I've never had it." Xiaowan, mocking him, was stunned. "You've never had candy?" His expression was complicated. "What kind of hard life have you been living outside?" Feeling guilty, Xiaowan handed over Xia Huai's figure, his tone much softer. "Take your time, don't rush." Tinga cherished the second sugar figure, licking it delicately, enjoying it. As for the remaining hairpin, Xiaowan awkwardly said, "This is a gift that Xixiang picked out for you. He really wanted to see you but was afraid you wouldn't welcome him." Sister-in-law, you don't know how restless he was on the way back. He was anxious to return. Xiaowan praised Xia Huai so much that I just smiled and pushed the hairpin away. Seeing that I was unmoved, Xiaowan was bewildered. "Xixiang has feelings for you. Why would you rather wander outside with a child than return to find us?" I rubbed my forehead in frustration. "What makes you think that my life has been miserable and fallen apart after leaving the Yunxia sect? Before I came to see you, I was living quite comfortably, much better than in the Yunxia sect. Having feelings for me while locking me and Tinga up like birds in a cage?" He stuttered, almost unable to answer. "Xixiang is also worried about you." Worried about us? What he truly feared was that I would run away.
9.
5 days later, the ancient divine mirror would open. As I had anticipated, I learned from Xiaowan that they were indeed on the invitation list of the Immortal Alliance. After avoiding me for many days, Xia Huai finally appeared. He came to see me because he had something to say. Yet, for some reason, he hesitated for a long time without speaking. The meticulously chosen hairpin he had gifted me lay carelessly on the table. Xia Huai glanced at it and rubbed the edge of the wooden box with his finger. "Don't you like it?" He casually closed the lid. "Qing Sui, I need to go out for a bit. I won't be long. When I return, I will cancel the engagement with Gu Xiangling. Wherever you want to go then, I will accompany you. I will have plenty of time to spend with you afterward, and we can slowly choose what you like." Xia Huai gave me a gentle smile, filled with some anticipation. "Will you wait for me?" I could easily deceive him. After hesitating for a moment, I ultimately didn't lie to him or answer the question. Xia Huai's disappointment was palpable, and when he left, he did not remove the restrictions from the small courtyard. I and Tinga were still trapped inside. What Xia Huai did not know was that as soon as he left, I pulled Tinga into my sleeve and stepped out of the small courtyard to follow him. Tinga transformed back into a palm-sized wooden figurine. In this smaller form, his features resembled Xia Huai's perfectly, as if carved from the same mold. I had repeatedly told Xia Huai that Tinga was not his child. I didn't know if he didn't believe me or simply didn't want to believe it. I didn't understand love deeply, but everything Xia Huai did was not what I wanted. Neither the abandonment from the past nor the regret of the present. He always made me feel like I had to concede. If I were truly just an ordinary mortal, then a long time spent confined in this little courtyard awaited me. I would have to swallow all my bitterness and grievances, waiting for Xia Huai to accomplish his grand task, and then fulfill his wish to perform a perfect reconciliation. What a miserable fate, worse than being a servant. I silently followed them, and Xia Huai led the disciples of Yunxia sect to meet Gu Xiangling and others in front of the ancient divine mirror. Tinga peeked out of my sleeve, and I reminded him softly, "Once we enter, stick close to me. If we get separated inside, I might not be able to find you again." Tinga withdrew his head in fear. The reason Xia Huai and I reunited in the Wanyao cave was that Tinga had run off. Having just transformed, he was confused and as naive as an ordinary child. Because he was mischievous and playful, He was captured by the demon clan as food. When I found him, it happened to be when Xia Huai led the disciples of the Immortal Alliance to clear the Wanyao cave. As the divine mirror opened, disciples of the Immortal Alliance entered one by one in an orderly fashion. To avoid detection by high-ranking cultivators, I concealed myself at the back, entering just as the mirror was about to close.
10.
Tang Chi was a Qilin, and we often played together since childhood. He had a fiery temper and was very impulsive. I was slow and easygoing. Our elders hoped we would balance each other out, but after hundreds of years, we hadn't managed to adjust at all. He would provoke demons in the west today and stir trouble with monsters in the east tomorrow, and if he got into a fight, he would also attack any of his own kin who happened to cross his path. In childhood, I followed behind him, but when he wanted to fight, he complained that I walked too slowly. Without saying a word, he would throw me onto his shoulder and hurry into battle. I would be jolted around and feel like I might vomit, and as I grew up, I played with him less and less. Nearly 200 years ago, a catastrophe occurred, and many of his clan perished in that disaster. The Qilin clan was already rare, and after that incident, Tang Chi became much more composed, no longer causing trouble everywhere. I once stumbled into the lair of some Tingsha snakes, which was not a big deal. But unfortunately, those snakes recognized me as Tang Chi's follower. Having a grudge against him, they decided to take it out on me. When Tang Chi arrived, he joined me in fighting several Tingsha snakes. We won, but Tang Chi, being careless, got poisoned in both eyes, leaving him with lasting damage. Over the past few years, it worsened, and if I hadn't returned to discover it, he would have kept it from me. This time, entering the ancient divine mirror, I sought two things: the 9 immortal herb and a pair of eyes. The former was the goal of many cultivators, while the latter depended on luck. The 9 immortal herb was rare, and it took me 3 days in the mirror to find 2 plants. After collecting the herbs and preparing to leave, several cultivators blocked my way. "Please wait, friend." They stood in front of me, politely bowing. A few wanted the 9 immortal herb I had just collected. When they saw I wouldn't part with it, they perhaps thought it unreasonable to snatch it and offered to exchange it for other treasures. I waved my hand, signaling them to find their own. Seeing this, they exchanged glances and asked which sect I belonged to. Before I could answer, I heard an extremely surprised voice. "Sister-in-law?" Xia Wan flew in front of me, unable to believe his eyes. "It's really you." He was so shocked he stuttered. "Why you? How did you get here?" Turns out she's a friend from Yunxia sect. The cultivators blocking me introduced themselves. Hearing that they wanted the 9 immortal herb I had picked, Xia Wan stared at me in a daze. "You must be mistaken." How could she possibly? Realizing I was here made it seem not impossible. This. What's this? My temper flared slightly. "Do you want me to give it to you?" Xia Wan immediately shook his head, coming to his senses. Everyone should earn what they get by their own abilities. If you want to trade, it must be mutual consent. When the others saw their attempt failing, they started to make a fuss. Xia Wan clearly didn't dare to offend them, yet he was unwilling to engage further, so he casually found an excuse to pull me away. Xia Wan made a hand sign and teleported me. Heavens! How did my senior brother bring you here? When we landed, we collided head-on with the Yunxia sex group. Seeing me, Xia Huai's eyes widened. "Qing Sui." He rarely spoke so sternly. "Xia Wan, how could you bring her here?" Xia Wan froze. "It wasn't me." I pushed Xia Wan away and brushed off the dust on my clothes. "I came here myself. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Gu Xiangling drew her long sword, and with a clang, she coldly rebuked. "Xia Huai, bringing someone back to Yunxia sect is one thing, but taking them everywhere? What do you think of my dignity?" Everyone quickly tried to dissuade her. "Sister Gu, let's talk calmly and not get agitated." It was finally a complete mess. 11. Without waiting to sort out the rights and wrongs, the ground beneath trembled, and countless spiked vines shot up from the earth, filling the air with a pungent, spicy smell. Xia Huai decisively ordered, "Withdraw." These vines grew at an incredible speed, attacking us relentlessly. The trees on either side of the mountain began to close in, blocking everyone's escape route. A dark purple mist swirled in from all directions, with Xia Huai shielding me beside him. I pushed him away, gracefully leaping to evade the vines that lunged at us from behind. Just take care of yourself. Xia Huai paused for a moment, gritting his teeth as he looked back at the other disciples. A vine as thick as two men's arms appeared, and I casually sliced it in half. The disciples of Yunxia's sect were in disarray, struggling to fend off the oncoming vines with their swords. Xiaowan glanced at me, his face one of shock and disbelief. When did she become this strong? Could it be that she's been possessed? Shut up. Gu Xiangling coldly chided him. Hurry up and move. This place is about to collapse. As we approached the exit, more and more disciples from the sect rushed out. The ground cracked open, revealing a chasm with red flames churning within, but no scorching heat was felt. I looked up at the mist-covered exit, where a glimmer of light beckoned the crowd to flee toward it. The vines dripped with blood, blooming with crimson buds. Green slime dripped from the flower cores, releasing black smoke upon contact with the ground. This isn't right. I turned sharply to warn Xia Huai. Don't go out that way. Jump into the chasm. Everyone looked at the bubbling magma in the crevice, their expressions incredulous. Isn't that suicide? Gu Xiangling said sternly. Don't listen to her. Go. I stole a glance at Xia Huai and caught a hint of hesitation on his face. These vines and the mist cause hallucinations. There's no exit over there, only a dead end. After saying that, I jumped into the massive chasm. In the next instant, Xia Huai followed me without hesitation. A vine, seemingly having eyes, chased after me the moment we jumped. I could have dodged it, but Xia Huai stepped in front of me, and the spiked tip pierced through his shoulder blade. He let out a muffled grunt and swung back to sever it. Xia Huai caught up and held me tightly. This chasm felt like an endless abyss. We fell for what seemed like ages, and when we landed, Xia Huai still held me close, his head resting on my shoulder as he hoarsely called my name. Qing Sui, who exactly are you?
12.
I am from the Phoenix clan. This year, I am 516 years old. Xiaowan calling me ancestress isn't wrong. The lifelong pursuit of cultivators is to become immortals or gods. I was born a god. Therefore, I have no spiritual roots and cannot practice like they do. Gods do not meddle in the world and should not interfere with cultivators' training. When I fought against the Tingsha, I inadvertently got involved with Yu Chenglin. The Tingsha are highly poisonous, and Yu Chenglin wouldn't have survived to return to Yunxia sect. I transferred some of my cultivation to help him get back. Yu Chenglin's fate shouldn't have included this calamity. Upon realizing his time was short, the only thing he couldn't let go of was Yunxia sect. Yu Chenglin had two favored disciples under his name, one being Xia Huai, who was mature and steady but indecisive, lacking in cultivation. The other was Gu Xiangling, who was exceptionally talented but had a radical and arrogant personality. He feared that if he fell, Yunxia's sect would follow suit. Yu Chenglin intended for Xia Huai to uphold the sect and asked me to stay at Yunxia's sect to help protect it for a while. As for how long this period would be, we tacitly agreed not to set a limit. As long as I remained at Yunxia's sect, I would protect them. I only needed to guard the mountain and ensure their safety. Those flowers and plants that I let die weren't because I didn't know how to care for them. It was because I watered and cared for them every day. Their blessings were too overwhelming, and they couldn't bear it. I later realized that cultivators were the same. Xia Huai taught me how to refine pills. I had indeed never encountered these before. After a bit of modification, I distributed them among the disciples. The disciples of Yunxia sect were like those flowers and plants. If they were over-fertilized, they would wither. They could only be nurtured slowly, bit by bit. The low-ranking disciples had advanced their cultivation speed rapidly in recent years, not because of extraordinary talent. Xia Huai and I spent every day together. I don't believe he didn't notice anything unusual during those years. He was a mortal who cultivated, but I had never been a mortal for a day. Xia Huai didn't ask or pry, so I lived freely. Hiding my identity was to avoid trouble. I feared that many people would come looking for issues, and I also feared many would come seeking help. So 5 years ago, when I left, I told Xia Huai that since I was no longer needed, I wouldn't stay. 13. As I spoke with Xia Huai, we were walking across an endless expanse of land. It was boundless, with no end in sight. Xia Huai had been poisoned, his complexion slightly bluish. He leaned heavily against me and murmured, "Qing Sui, do you hate me?" Hate him? I thought carefully, and realized I didn't. At most, I felt a bit of regret. After living for over 500 years, it was the first time I had experienced love and what it felt like to be moved. But he couldn't give me what I desired. If we were meant to be together, we would be. If not, we would part ways. One cannot force a connection that isn't strong enough. Did you ever love me even a little? Xia Huai smiled sadly. If I had firmly chosen you back then, would you have stayed? I asked if you could invest everything in planning for me. I turned to look at him. Your everything can't give me what I want. Xia Huai closed his eyes briefly, his heart like ashes. I can't keep you anymore, can I? Tinga. As soon as he mentioned this name, Tinga slipped out from my sleeve. I'm here. Xia Huai froze, instinctively straightening his body. Tinga looked at him. Can't you stand? Do you need me to help you? All right. In this strange land, we couldn't use our powers to fly. After walking for what felt like ages, we were met with a blinding light. As we stepped out, we came face to face with a group of disheveled disciples from the sect. The atmosphere was off. Upon seeing Xia Huai and me suddenly appear, everyone was startled. Injured and covered in wounds, Xia Wan's eyes lit up as he rushed toward us joyfully from the crowd. Senior brother, sister-in-law. Before he could reach me, Gu Xiangling raised a hand to stop him. Everyone looked at me with wary and complicated expressions. Gu Xiangling gazed at Xia Huai and said solemnly, "Someone has meddled with things they shouldn't have. Right now, the exit of the divine mirror is sealed, and we can't get out." Every word pointed at me without explicitly naming me. The few disciples who had tried to snatch the Jiuxian grass from me were the first to speak up. There must be a powerful demon or monster that came in. Sect leader Xia, that person beside you. Before he could finish, Xia Huai immediately denied it. She's not. She's not. A high-ranking cultivator from another sect stepped forward, sneering as he pointed at Qingya. If she's not, then this little demon isn't either? Qingya quickly hid behind me. Xia Huai's expression turned cold, drawing his sword to shield me. What are the demons? She has never done anything wrong. What reason do you have to hold her accountable? Gu Xiangling frowned. Xia Huai, the divine mirror is sealed, and we can't leave. Xia Wan couldn't take it anymore. Even if it's sealed, it's not my sister-in-law's fault. You want to blame her without even investigating properly. Is that how it works? Just because someone is a demon, you want to shout for blood? Since when have cultivators been so unreasonable? I don't see you all being upright and honorable. Can one's status define their worth? Just because she's a demon or a monster, she's bad, and just because someone is immortal, they're useless? If she were a god, wouldn't you all kneel and lick her boots? His words darkened everyone's faces. I couldn't help but laugh. As annoying as Xia Wan was, he had a way with words. Before they could say more, the world suddenly went dark. A massive shadow appeared in the sky, blocking out the sun. Under its terrifying pressure, the disciples of the sect changed color. Qingya couldn't withstand it and transformed back into his original form. I quickly pulled him back into my sleeve, while Xia Huai beside me coughed up blood. Someone gasped, their eyes wide with terror, and shouted, "Zhu Long!" In the ancient divine mirror, there was a primordial dragon known as Zhu Jiuyin. It was merely a trace of divine breath left behind after the dragon god's fall 1,000 years ago. It was said that the reason the ancient divine mirror could persist and exist in the world was due to its protection. Cultivators never dared to provoke this legendary dragon god. The immense dragon's pressure left everyone breathless. Zhu Long circled once, effortlessly enclosing us within its vast body. The enormous dragon had loomed above, its long whiskers flowing, golden eyes half open as they regarded everyone. Before it, these powerful cultivators were no different from ants. It let out a deep laugh, its voice booming. "You took my things and still wish to leave?" Zhu Long's gaze fell down upon everyone, including me. "Hand it over." Who? Who took the dragon god's belongings? Those few cultivators who had attempted to snatch the Jiuxian grass turned pale, their knees buckling as they fell to the ground. One was so scared, he wet his pants, trembling as he took out a round object from his Qingkuan bag. It was crystal clear, and only the size of a palm. Zhu Long asked, "Is that all?" He wept bitterly, looking at his companions. We consumed it." Zhu Long lowered its head, narrowing its eyes. "Didn't your seniors teach you what you should and shouldn't take when entering here?" They did." It chuckled. "You could have taken it by your own strength, but you resorted to stealing and then tried to frame others?" As soon as it finished speaking, the other three companions of his suddenly widened their eyes, spewing black blood as they collapsed. They lost their breath on the spot. The cultivator holding the treasure rolled his eyes and then foamed at the mouth, fainting on the spot. Everyone was too terrified to speak. Zhu Long exhaled, its long whiskers stirring, and its enormous golden eyes turned to me. It spoke my name, Qing Sui, 14. My heart jolted. I stepped forward and respectfully bowed. "Greetings, senior." Its enormous body slowly swam in the air, and it even laughed. "You've grown so big. Speaking of which, I once held you when you were little, back when you were still in your egg." Zhu Long gently swept its tail, causing the wind to make it hard for everyone to stand. It lazily asked me, "What is it that you seek by coming here?" I looked up into its enormous golden eyes. "Your eyes." "All right." It gestured towards the several corpses. "Take them by your own ability. If you can take it, you may leave. If you can't, you will be buried here." Xiaohui gripped my hand tightly. "Don't go. Don't agree to it." I pushed him away. I never seek my own suffering, nor am I blindly arrogant. I came here for the Jiuxian grass and Zhu Long's eyes. I handed Qingya, who was in my sleeve, to him. "Take good care of Qingya. Once I've accomplished this, I will come back for him." The divine mirror opened, and all the cultivators were blown away by a surge of dragon breath. Xia Huai looked furious. "Qing Sui." I transformed into my true form and soared into the sky. In that moment, I suddenly thought of Peng Qi. If he were here, I would let him go wait outside, and he would do so without a word. I was confident in my own strength and judgment. I wouldn't be foolish enough to seek my own death. Xia Huai seemed to always view me as weak, thinking that my life after leaving Yunxia sect was not good. I could easily cut down those vines, yet he insisted on blocking an attack for me, which led to his injury. Even after I revealed my true identity to him, he still reacted as if I was going to my death. I sighed slightly, feeling the sting from a whip of the dragon's tail. Zhu Long looked at me. "Why are you dazed? Show some respect to your opponent." It took half a month to emerge from the ancient divine mirror. This battle had been exhilarating. My muscles and bones, which hadn't felt such relief in many years, were revitalized, and I hurriedly made my way to Yunxia sect with Zhu Long's blessing. Zhu Long was merely a remnant of divine breath. As long as the mirror existed, it would not perish. In time, its eyes would grow back. When I arrived at Yunxia sect, Qingya was having a great time. In the martial arts hall, he was riding on the backs of the disciples, and upon seeing me, he joyfully squealed and quickly jumped off the disciple he was riding. I watched as that disciple scrambled to his feet, nervously stretching out his arms behind Qingya. "Young master, slow down." Veins bulged on my forehead as I recalled what Xiaowan had said that day. If she were a goddess, wouldn't you all kneel and lick her boots on the spot? In less than a quarter of an hour, everyone in Yunxia sect knew I had returned. Having been here for 8 years, I had never received such grand treatment. For elders hurriedly came over, leading a group of disciples, eager to kneel and express their gratitude to me. They had already learned the truth, addressing me as Divine Lord, treating me with utmost respect. This was a stark contrast to over a decade ago when they would point at me from their high positions, not daring to look down upon me. I couldn't bear this bow, frowning and gesturing for them to rise. As I scanned the crowd, I didn't see Xia Huai. I said my goodbyes and took Tinga, turning to leave. The elders hastily stood up, blocking my path. They hesitated, wanting to ask me to stay at Yunxia sect for a while longer. I found it amusing. 5 years ago when I left, not a single one of you wanted to keep me here. They exchanged awkward glances, extremely embarrassed and too scared to respond. As I walked out of the hall, I ran into the late-arriving Xia Huai. He looked anxious, his face pale and noticeably thinner. Upon seeing me, he halted in place. Xia Huai forced a smile. "Are you leaving?" "Yes." I thought he would try to persuade me to stay, but Xia Huai only said he would see me off. When we reached the foot of the mountain, we remained silent for a long time, and I finally spoke. "This is where we part ways." Xia Huai nodded and took out a jade pendant from his pocket. It was a simple design, with one corner chipped. Carved on it was the character for blessing, strung with a vibrant red cord. He hung the jade pendant around Tinga's neck, squatting down to rub his forehead as he asked, "Can I hug you?" This time, Tinga didn't refuse. He opened his arms and embraced him back without hesitation. After walking a considerable distance, I looked back and could faintly see Xia Huai still standing in place. This was our last meeting. Extras.
1.
After emerging from the ancient divine mirror, Xia Huai fell into a deep sleep for a while due to the effects of poison. He repeatedly dreamed the same dream. In the dream, he held Qingya's hand with his left hand and intertwined his fingers with Qing Sui's on his right. The three of them walked on the vast and boundless earth, entering the world filled with the aroma of life. Qingya pointed at the sugar figurines, clamoring to buy one, while he focused on selecting hairpins for Qing Sui, patiently coaxing Qingya to wait a bit longer. His wife chose a simple hairpin and tucked it into her dark hair, asking him how it looked. Sometimes the scene in the dream shifted to a cozy courtyard in the main peak. He pushed the door open, and the candlelight illuminated the room. Qing Sui lay lazily in a reclining chair, while Qingya sprawled on a small couch, sleeping soundly. Seeing him return, she got up and poured him a cup of tea. She then asked where he had been recently. They spoke softly, their shadows overlapping on the ground. For decades, Xia Huai had this dream intermittently. Later on, he would occasionally dream that Qing Sui asked him if he could give everything for her, doing everything he could to plan. In the dream, he saw himself telling her loudly and firmly that he could. Even earlier, when Gu Xiangling had just returned, he didn't let his inner turmoil and avoidance keep him from seeing Qing Sui, nor did he make her wait for him day after day. Unfortunately, all of this was just a dream. Once Xia Huai reached the stage of transforming his spirit, his cultivation stagnated. No matter how much he closed himself off, he could not break through. Xia Huai harbored an unresolvable heart demon, tracing back to before he entered the immortal gate. In the year he turned 172, Xia Huai handed over the position of sect leader to Xia Wan. He left Yunxia sect and wandered the world to seek his own path. For over a decade, Xia Huai traveled countless places. He passed through his birthplace in Jiangnan and remembered being born into a wealthy family, with his mother being a maidservant beside Master Xia. At that time, the world was unstable, often plagued by wars, chaos, and monsters. Iron cavalry from neighboring countries invaded Jiangnan, and the wealthy merchants fled for their lives, taking only their wives and legitimate sons, hastily boarding boats north with their possessions. Xia Huai and his mother were left behind. His mother, unwilling to give up, planned to follow him north to find his father. The journey from Jiangnan to the capital took more than 2 months, and after enduring countless hardships, his mother finally understood. Though the distance wasn't very far, it would take a lifetime for them to reach the capital. They settled in Yanqing, where his mother set up a small stall to survive, selling cold cakes every day, leaving early and returning late. Business was unpredictable, barely enough to make ends meet. As winter arrived, Xiaohui didn't even have a thick coat. He froze, his hands and feet covered in sores, huddled in his mother's arms, shivering for warmth. The rice soup was too thin to fill his stomach. He drank bowl after bowl, yet still woke up hungry in the middle of the night. Outside, it was bitterly cold. The water on the table froze into ice. Xia Huai stuffed a corner of his sleeve into his mouth, trying to nibble on it until he fell asleep. As an orphan and a widow, they were easy targets for bullying. Fortunately, the butcher, Uncle Li, next door was a righteous man, often helping them by driving away those unscrupulous local ruffians. Xia Huai remembered his father, handsome and charming, with an elegant demeanor. But Uncle Li was indeed not good-looking, with a big face, a thick neck, and small eyes that revealed crooked teeth when he smiled. His mother said not to judge people by their appearance. Uncle Li often visited, and every time he came, he would give Xia Huai a copper coin, sending him out to play. Xia Huai saved up the coins, not daring to spend them. Whenever he wandered outside and saw the old man making sugar figurines, he would squat in front of him, watching intently. The old man was skilled, and each sugar figurine was lifelike. Xia Huai remembered that when he was at home, his father would hold him on his lap and feed him sugar cakes, then give him a warm cup of red date tea, making him feel warm all over. The rich, sweet flavor lingered in his memory. He counted the copper coins in his hand, imagining that one day, when he found his father, he would ask him to take him to buy sugar from the old man. Just like the family of three he passed by, buying 3 small sugar figurines, one like his mother, one like him, and one like his father. His days of being cared for by the butcher didn't last long. The butcher's wife came knocking, dragging his mother toward the door. While beating and scolding, she hurled a slew of foul curses. Angrily, he rushed over, wanting to protect his mother, but his frail body was slapped unconscious by the butcher's wife. Later, he and his mother left Yanqing, wandering for a long time, until they heard that Jiangnan had been reclaimed, the enemy had retreated, and many people were returning. With a glimmer of hope, his mother took him back to Jiangnan, only to find that his father had not returned, lost to the chaos of war, with no news. His mother took him to seek refuge with relatives in a neighboring city. Xia Huai couldn't clearly remember those days, only recalling the continued hardships. Until the woman he called Aunt married a widower. When his mother remarried, he was left behind. Xia Huai cried all the way and chased after her, walking from dawn to dusk, covering more than 40 miles, his feet blistered with blood before finally finding the widower's house. He refused to leave, shrinking at the widower's doorstep day by day. As Xia Huai cried outside, his mother cried inside. After enduring 4 days, the widower could no longer stand it and brought him inside. Xia Huai experienced the happiest and most stable days of his life, with enough food and warm clothing. As night fell, his mother sat by the oil lamp, mending clothes for the widower, while Xia Huai sat opposite her, slowly enjoying the steaming noodles. When she married in, the house was dilapidated and messy. But in just a month, with his mother's capable hands, it became neat and tidy. In the autumn of the following year, his mother gave birth to a daughter for the widower. The next year, she gave birth to a son. The household became lively, and Xia Huai helped care for his younger sister and brother, sharing the household chores, until a strange illness struck the village, causing continuous deaths. The shaman divined that the people of this village had offended the gods and were being punished. The solution was to offer 4 young boys and girls to the mountain's Luoniangniang temple for 3 months. After 2 years of offerings, the sins would dissipate.
2.
At first, no one was willing, but the families that escaped died the next day. As more and more people died, everyone began to panic. After the first batch of young boys and girls was sent, the disaster indeed calmed down. Then came the second batch and the third. Soon it was the widower's turn. He sat at the door, his deep gaze frightening Xia Huai to the core. He begged the widower and his mother not to send him to be sacrificed to Luoniangniang. His sister crawled on the ground, and his brother cried on the bed. The family killed an old hen, and the chicken soup simmered, fragrant and rich. His mother trembled as she served him the soup, saying, "Mother won't send you away. How could she bear to send you away?" As she spoke, tears fell into the soup bowl. When Xiaohui woke up in the Luoniangniang temple, the monster had already eaten its third child. The rich, nauseating smell of blood spread. At first, he could hear screams, but gradually they weakened, leaving only the chilling sound of crunching and chewing. Xiaohui raised his hand to touch something, and in the moonlight that streamed in, he saw a blood-stained rag. He thought he was going to die here. The Luoniangniang temple was once dedicated to the gods, but later, during the war, the incense ceased and the idols were destroyed. Little Xiaohui lay in a pool of blood, hearing the monster devour people. He cried, touching the broken jade pendant at his collar, looking at the damaged idol, lips moving as he silently repeated his question. If the gods truly had spirit, could they save him? Could they save him? Heaven seemed to hear his prayer. Yu Qinglin appeared in this ruined temple. He killed the monster and saved him. In that moment of utmost despair, the divine manifested. Yu Qinglin asked him if he wanted to come with him or return home. Xiaohui thought for a moment. He wanted to go home and take a look. As dawn broke, his mother got up on time, just as she always did, drawing water to wash and cooking. When the first rays of morning sunlight rose, she was feeding his little sister breakfast, one mouthful at a time, coaxing her, her eyes filled with tenderness. It seemed she had forgotten. Just last night, she had sent her son to the gates of hell. Xiaohui felt a chill all over. He looked up at Yu Qinglin and said, "I'll go with you." 3. Xiaohui arrived at the former Majiakan. Over 100 years had passed. The sea had turned into mulberry fields, and the world had changed. Old friends had long since turned into a mound of yellow earth, and the former Luoniangniang temple had long been submerged in the passage of time. As he walked here, he suddenly remembered. Being abandoned felt like this. Because he wasn't important enough, he was cast aside. She had never even tried her best for him. She only felt guilty as she sent him away. On the long path of immortality, he had long forgotten the hardships of his childhood. What he remembered most was the responsibility on his shoulders, the honor of being the eldest disciple. He recalled when he first married Qingsui, thinking that a mortal's life spanned only a few decades. For an immortal, that was merely a flick of a finger. Just pity her. No, it was pity for him. It turned out he was just a grain of sand in the life of the gods. When Xie Yuanwei abandoned his wife and children, it was spring. He was still young, unaware that a single farewell meant an eternal separation. When Qingsui left with the divorce papers, it was also spring. He had been waiting for spring to return. But the spring days lost to the passage of time would never come back. For decades, Xiaohui traveled to the ends of the earth. He vaguely felt that his end was near, his heart only holding a blurry thought. After nearly 100 years of separation, he had not seen Qingsui again. He wanted to see her one more time, even if just for a moment. Xiaohui's final destination was still Jiangnan. He found a tea house and sat by the window. The waiter brought tea and sweet cakes. Xiaohui picked up a piece and took a bite. The soft, sweet taste was remarkably similar to his memories. He lowered his gaze, staring at the clear tea in the cup, and took another sip. Outside, the streets bustled with people. Suddenly, Xiaohui heard a familiar voice. "I'm not buying any more. You've already had 8 pieces of candy."
Mom.
Tang Qi. "Hey, it won't help if you beg me. Your mother won't agree." Xiaohui felt as if he had fallen into a dream. He slowly put down the teacup and turned his head, his gaze crossing through the crowd, finally seeing the person who had haunted his dreams.